living beautiful lives. Wives, in the same way, be submissive to your husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behaviour of their wives, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. I suspect many people would dismiss this part of Scripture as outdated and irrelevant. The previous 2 centuries have seen great advances in the emancipation of women. Are these verses from the New Testament simply turning the clock back in a way that's unhelpful? Before we jump to that conclusion, let's look closely at what they're saying. But first of all, what they're not saying. Wives, be submissive to your husbands. This is not advocating a mindless denial of women's freedom, and is not endorsing a bully boy, laddish immaturity among men. Another possible stumbling block could be the words "in the same way." In the same way as what? As slaves to masters? Chapter 2, verse 18? No. In the same way as everyone is to be submissive. Chapter 2, verse 13. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake. This agrees with Paul's teaching in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. When you become a Christian, this is the relationship that matters most. Of course, other relationships are important, but the number one relationship that determines every other is your relationship with Jesus, your Lord. In this chapter, Peter talks directly to wives, and he talks about 3 things that matter to women: communication, beauty, and security. Communication. You know the old joke, what are the 3 fastest forms of communication? Telegraph, telephone, and telewoman. The fact is that women are far better than men at communicating. They need to express their feelings, whereas men tend to bottle things up. Of course, when it comes to communication, the real experts are children. They just blab everything out. But in the adult world, women are far better than men. In the situation Peter was writing to, he was aware of women who had become Christians, but who were married to men who had not been converted. Some of these women had tried to win their men for Christ, but without success. And there was a danger that by persisting, they would only annoy their husbands, rub them up the wrong way, and put them off completely. Peter's advice is this: communicate by your attitude, communicate by your behavior, communicate by your purity, communicate by your reverence. Don't be rebellious, be submissive. If you haven't struck oil, stop digging, but keep loving. Let your attitude and your actions do the talking, and they will be won over without words. The second thing that matters to women and which Peter latches onto is beauty. I don't think anyone could deny that this is a subject women are interested in. What does Peter have to say about it? Something negative, something positive, and something illustrative. First, something negative. Your beauty should not come from outward adornment such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewellery and fine clothes. Again, we have to avoid a misunderstanding. This is not saying that jewellery and makeup and fashion are wrong for the Christian. It's not saying that the dowdier you are, the better you are as a Christian wife. What it is saying is that outward beauty is not everything. Here are some words from the Old Testament book of Proverbs. Proverbs 31, verse 30. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And then I hesitate to quote this one. Proverbs 11, verse 22. A beautiful woman who shows no discretion is like a gold ring in a pig's snout. Coming back to Peter, he says specifically what he means. He's talking about ridiculously extravagant hairdos, outrageously expensive jewelry, and an obsession with clothes that is out of all proportion. If you want to be beautiful, and that's not wrong, that's not the way to go. So what is? Verse 4 brings us from the negative to the positive. Rather, your beauty should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. Your beauty should reflect the hidden person of the heart. As the proverb reminded us, outward beauty is fleeting. It fades and disappears. But true inward beauty doesn't fade. In fact, it increases and lasts, even beyond death. What is this inner, unfading beauty? It is the beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. Quiet doesn't mean silent. It means serene, calm, unruffled. And Peter tells us that this is of great value in God's sight. I'm sure you're familiar with the L'Oreal adverts because you're worth it. L'Oreal can give you lipstick and mascara and moisturizer, everything you need for outward beauty. But the Christian woman has access to a different kind of beauty, everything you need for inner beauty. And God says, because I'm worth it. When the manufacturers of cosmetics want to sell us their products, they bring out the best looking models to show them off. And Peter too has some models to illustrate God's preparation for inner beauty. Verse 5. For this is the way the holy women of the past, who put their hope in God, used to make themselves beautiful. They were submissive to their own husbands. And Peter has a supermodel to bring onto the holiness catwalk in verse 6. Sarah. Like Sarah who obeyed Abraham and called him her master. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. If these verses conjure up a picture of a subservient, downtrodden person in a mob cap saying, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, then think again. Sarah wasn't like that at all. In Genesis chapter 18, we see her having a giggle about her and her old husband having a baby. And in chapter 21, there is a very interesting incident where Sarah has to get very forceful over Hagar, the other woman. Abram wasn't perfect, but Sarah respected him and was faithful to him. She had that inner beauty that Peter is talking about. Communication, beauty. And in verse 7, Peter turns to a third thing that matters to women: security in relationships. And at this point, he turns from the wives and speaks to the husbands. Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. In the same way. Again we ask, in the same way as what? For the Lord's sake. There are 2 instructions: be considerate and treat them with respect. there are two descriptions: the weaker partner and those who with you inherit the gracious gift of life. And there is an added incentive, so that nothing will hinder your prayers. Be considerate is literally living together according to knowledge. For husbands, marriage is a voyage of discovery, not insisting on what I want and what pleases me, but finding out what my wife wants and what pleases her. There's an old song that captures what Peter is saying here. Getting to know you, getting to know all about you, getting to like you, getting to hope you like me. Be considerate. The second instruction is treat them with respect. In your words, in your actions, in your gestures, when you're with other people. One of the lasting memories from my childhood was visiting a family where the husband was constantly criticizing his wife, making snide remarks about her. Even as a child, I was embarrassed and felt uncomfortable. Peter tells it straight. Husbands, treat your wives with respect. And then the descriptions. A wife is described as the weaker partner, literally the weaker vessel. That doesn't sound very complimentary, does it? But think for a moment about two vessels. A delicate china ornament and a metal bucket that you'd use for carrying cement. Now you drop each of them on a hard concrete surface. Which is the weaker vessel? And husbands, which would your wife prefer to be compared with? There is a kind of security that women crave, and it's not entirely in their power to guarantee. It's up to us men to give it to them. Then both husband and wife are described as joint heirs of the grace of life. Married life isn't all chocolates and red roses. We all make mistakes. We all let each other down. We all need God's grace. The grace to admit you're wrong and say sorry. The grace to forgive when your wife says sorry to you. And finally, so that nothing may hinder your prayers. Marriage is a spiritual partnership, a shared ministry. We must all submit to one another, submitting in the Lord and submitting to the Lord.